So today I'm going to be talking about, I'd start with women and culture and the different things in different societies that can influence a woman's well-being. And I may have a 1-minute tea break in between the topics, and I might not, but let's see how we go. If I knew how to put people into breakout groups, I would do it. But I think we're okay with the numbers that we've got here. We should be all right. So I'm going to start and share the screen.
Oh, where have we gone? Oh, there we are.
Okay. So I'm looking at women, culture and conception, and we look at female genital cutting and beliefs about how babies are made. So we'll be exploring beliefs about the nature of reality and health. And would you have your microphones off for the moment, and then, but when it's discussions, do turn yourself on. So the kinds of things that we'll explore today are child marriage, child brides, the concept of honour and shame, female circumcision, rape and silence, conception, and the problems of being gay in different societies. So I just wanted to mention that some of the people may be sensitive to the topics, so that if you think I am out of order, or if you're particularly sensitive about something, then do say, because there may be people in the group who can offer support. So if you're feeling sensitive, do say so. And can I ask, what kind of things have you heard about that influence a woman's well-being? Have you, the anthropologists amongst you? What I'll do.
Think a lot.
Hi, Karen.
I think like most of us, a lot of our influences are whilst we're growing up and we're watching our parents, aunts, watching families, you know, we learn from the families. And I was actually brought up in the collieries. So everyone knew everyone's business, but at the same time, if you needed support, everyone was there. And it was very much, the man goes out and earns the money, and the woman stays at home and looks after the house and the children. And in most cases, she was quite dominated by the man. You know, what he said was law. So I think for our cultures over here, that is probably where I got a lot of my things from. You know, if I didn't, sometimes I didn't feel great as I was growing up and thought, oh no, but you know, you've got to put your man first, because that's where I came from. You know, no matter how I feel, I have to make sure he's okay and the children. And so I think it's your community, the community that you grow up in, you get a lot of influence from that. So it's not always easy to put your well-being first, because it's what you've learned, you know, as you've grown up. And I have worked with a lot of asylum seekers and refugees, and then when they've told me their stories, I think, oh, how sad, you know, that a lot of them have had to come to this country, and then it's been totally alien the way the women here have had more freedom, and they couldn't really get out of that because that's not where they came from, that's what they've grown up with. So I think it is, you know, a lot of it is obviously your culture and your community.
Yeah, and of course it's knowing, having enough distance to witness what you're seeing or what you're doing. Thank you.
I think for me, it's looking at sort of the decades. I'm nearly 50, and looking at sort of what's happened throughout the decades in terms of sort of women's liberation. If you think of sort of the 1960s and the start of contraception pills, that sort of had an influence in the Western world over here, you know, to sort of stop that.
All right.
And also things like nowadays it's you know, it's sort of acceptable for women to bring up children and have a career at the same time, where that wasn't sort of 30 years ago. I know it's still difficult for some. So what Carolyn was saying is very sort of, in my experience, my mum was my mum had me at quite an older age. She was 43 when she had me. She's 90 odd now, bless her. But she sort of had Victorian sort of standards of how she was brought up in her household. So it is influenced by your family and what you see through your friends as well.
Yeah, thank you. And what becomes normal? And I showed an image last time of excuse me a minute. I showed an image last time of the population of northwest London, and we could see that just in northwest London, people were coming from Africa, Asia, South America, Mexico, Canada. So we need to know about different cultures and how they understand their beliefs. And I'm looking at the beginning of child brides, because I'm looking at India in this first slide, where marriage is prohibited for women younger than 18 and men under 21. But actually what happens is that the law is one thing and people's practice is another. And child brides can be married to maintain honour or settle debts, and with a daughter it's one less mouth to feed. And again in Sudan, in a very rural area, girls are considered an economic burden and they're married early to preserve honour. And the belief is that it keeps girls from immoral behaviour. So, and the families aren't aware of breaking the law, it's just custom and practice. And I've got this map here of child brides across the world, and you can see that it's really widespread. So on the one hand, the legal system can forbid child marriage, and on the other, these traditional customs do prevail. And I've got this one case study, I think it was from Croydon, where a woman visited a clinic. She had excellent English, but she presented with severe anxiety and shallow breathing, and she can't concentrate on work. And once she saw the counsellor, they found out that she was married to a violent man and wanted to leave him. And she feared her father would order her brothers and cousins to kill her. So she came to a couple of counselling sessions, and then she didn't attend any more sessions. And the following year, people heard that 2 men had been jailed for strangling their sister, and the father and the uncle were also jailed for life. It's an old case in 2006, but it isn't an old happening. And before her death, she tried to warn the police that members of her family were trying to kill her. Now, this image here, it's an organization called Karma Nirvana that wants to raise awareness about the honor of abuse of forced marriage. And when they opened in 2008, they received 4,000 calls from people the first year. This was set up in Derby, and they still take 300 calls a month from people under threat of forced marriage. And there's all kinds of problems with forced marriage because people live with fear and rejection of their family and their friends. But this is the organisation karmanirvana.org.uk. And the difference between forced and arranged marriage, forced marriage is when you're coerced into marrying someone against your will. You may be physically threatened, and it is an abuse of human rights and cannot be justified on any religious or cultural basis. Whereas arranged marriage, you have a choice as to whether to accept the arrangement or not. And many arranged marriages are very successful and last a long time. So there's a difference. And then the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, marriage shall be entered into only with the free and full consent of the intending spouses. And then in the UK, we've got the forced marriage unit that medical and healthcare staff can bring their attention to. And this domestic violence london.nhs.uk, it's a resource for healthcare professionals. Now I'm just switching topics ruthlessly here and looking at being Asian, male and gay. And the forced marriage unit does help men. 14% of the people who called them were male, and there was violence because they were gay. Initially, the majority of cases were South Asia, Pakistan, India and Bangladesh, but there may be underreporting. And the victims are usually between 15 and 24 and may be locked up and subject to physical violence. We first had an example of this in EastEnders. I don't know if any of you watch EastEnders, where a gentleman was forced to marry who was gay. What happens is the parents fear losing everything. They become social outcasts from the community, not only in the UK, but also wherever at home was. And other children and siblings may be shunned, and it can lead to many loveless marriages, although there are priests and imams who help men reconcile their sexuality with their faith. But it's also an issue in Africa amongst Christian people. I just give an example amongst Muslim here, but it's also an issue elsewhere. And I'm quickly shimmying over. There was an issue of gang rape in India, and it was in 2012 where a young woman was raped and killed on a bus, and there was an absolutely massive outcry. And one reporter said, Indians pray to goddesses in temples but abuse women in the domestic sphere. we elect women to powerful political office, yet mistreat girls in public. And there was a huge outcry against that particular rate. But people said, there's genocide against female fetuses, because that's what the culture sanctions. And there are problems. Rapes have been underreported and the police have a poor record. But I believe in India now there's a female police force that women can go to. But it seems that with rape, and it happens here in the UK as well, the victim can be blamed and shamed, and the perpetrators can be let off the hook. So it's an issue in India with a strong preference for sons over daughters, and it leads to sex selective abortions, and I'll look at those again in a minute. And there are 2 million women missing in a given year in there. 12% disappear at birth, 25% die in childhood, and 18% at reproductive ages. And each year, more than 100,000 women are killed by fire. These are the people who are reporting on that with the evidence. And so my question is, we'll just stop for a minute. What extent is this kind of context transferable to the country where you are? Would anybody like to unmute themselves and comment on this?
Okay, I think it's essential that we're aware of those things, and without that knowledge, we kind of work into what we think is acceptable or normal, but we need to know those things in order to be able to do our work effectively. I work in mental health, and I've worked in Derbyshire, and I had quite a lot of women who were in fear of their lives, for example, if they were to be honest about how they felt about their husbands or what was happening. And 2 women I worked with disappeared overnight. Yeah, so I think it's really essential. I now work in Ireland, and there's a huge lack of knowledge. We work with lots of people now coming to Ireland from other countries, and it's really important that we're on the ball, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, just to be familiar with this unspoken, there's certain symptoms like anxiety and the like, and it's unless we know to ask the question, and why would we? Why would we? How would we go about asking somebody, excuse me, is there anything else bothering you? How would we know? Thank you, Margaret.
I think that, hello? I think that a lot of what's being shared we think of as being a problem in other places and kind of push it to the side rather than acknowledging that, of course, it's not just another country's problem. It affects us all.
Yes, and it may be manifested in different ways. And domestic violence does go both ways. It can be women against men as well.
I think sharing some information about domestic violence from the experience that I've had working with victims of domestic violence. I was involved in, I don't ever want to be involved in one again, a domestic homicide review. Ooh. And just, obviously I can't go into masses of detail, but one of the things that came out was that the victim was receiving text messages, etc., off the perpetrator, but for some reason didn't feel comfortable enough in telling professionals that this was happening. She told friends what was happening and going on, and it was sort of, but they were told not to say anything to anybody. I mean, there's a bigger picture, but I can't go into too much detail. But it's about having that relationship with somebody to be able to sort of share those things with you, and it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, yes, especially when you're told not to mention it.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I just wanted to say that I think that there is a big stigma around these kinds of issues that are very sort of like, they're weighted in a way that like has like a really horrible impact on women, like in terms of like stalking cases and things like that. Like the law is really far behind with this kind of stuff, and it's only just like catching up, I think, the last like 10 years, where, you know, if someone is being stalked by someone that they know, and that's the thing, is like very often obviously with these domestic violence cases, obviously it's like the people that they are close with, and people don't expect it necessarily, or there's still like this stigma attached or like around this sort of like relationship at home that's like really private. So I guess it's like the kind of like the tension between like bringing that private relationship into the community and like the open, and like also the state being involved in that. It's obviously like throws up all of these different like tensions and problems. But yeah, I think that the stigma of silence is like one of the huge issues with it. I'd agree with that for sure.
Yes, because it is the silence of the woman, the silence of the family, the counsellor that's brought into silence. And then when do you speak up? When it's too late?
Yeah.
How do you know? What extent do you know? Well, all right, thank you. I'm going to share once again the screen. I'm going to look at female circumcision, which affects people from certain countries of certain religion. And this was a book written by Waris Deary, who I believe was Sudanese, called Desert Flower. And the World Health Organization divides it as all procedures involving partial or total removal of external female genitalia or other injury to the female genital organs, whether for cultural or non-therapeutic reasons. And it affects 150 million women worldwide. In the UK, we've got an organisation called AFRUCA, Africans Unite Against Child Abuse. And then I've just got a map of the world where female genital mutilation occurs. And I was told not to use mutilation when I'm working with people of certain geographical locations, but to say cutting, female genital cutting, because mutilation is a Western assumption. But now people of those faiths and religions are taking it on and promoting itself. But you can see the cases from North America, South America, right across Christian and Muslim Africa, across India and Asia. And it's also an issue in Canada, but Canada doesn't seem to have got on the map. So, and then we ask, why do it? And it's for social acceptance, because people believe uncircumcised girls are unclean or unmarriageable. Some people believe it's a religious obligation, it's a requirement. and the people may be Christian or Muslim, and yet neither the Bible nor the Quran supports it. So the Bible is absolutely silent on female genital mutilation. There was a directive from God to remove the foreskins of males through circumcision, but nowhere in the Bible is it mentioned about female children or grown women should be circumcised. And then in the Quran, there's equally nothing, not in the words of the Quran, not in the words of the prophets. And this was reaffirmed by the Grand Mufti in Egypt, who said the Prophet Muhammad did not circumcise his 4 daughters. So it's not an Islamic requirement. It appears to be cultural. And in the UK, in London now, University College Hospital has opened a specialist clinic for child victims of FGM with the aim of reducing the practice. But it's like, how do you find out if it's happened to anybody? Do you stop people going for family holidays with children of a certain age? But the clinic liaises closely with police and social care. But it says in UK, over 20,000 girls under the age of 5 are at risk of female genital mutilation. Now, I'm wondering whether to take a tea break of 1 minute or just to carry on. Has anybody got any thoughts about that? But I think let's carry on. We've had the thought of a tea break. Excuse me. Am I sharing the screen or not? You can see how professional I am, that we're shimmying through the slides until I get to the one I want. But that's how it is. So what I'm going to be looking at for the next few moments is looking at conception and beliefs about how babies are made. And I mentioned already about fetus gender selection. And we'll look at a few cultural explanations for conception and what is a baby made of, and the issues around choosing your baby's gender. Now, all the things I'm covering here, I'm covering in the book that I wrote, because the students, when I was teaching medical students, they said, had I written anything? So the book is on cultural perspectives of mental well-being. So there's issues around gender selection, and what happens is that early gender tests lead to selective abortions of girls in the UK. So you can get a test, you can find out what the gender of your child is. And the normal male to female ratio at birth is 1.05 boys born to every 100 girls. And in India, there is a ban on sex selective abortion. It's illegal, but there's 1.20 boys for every girl. And in China, the ratio is 1.4 boys for every girl. And then in the UK, 1,500 to 4,700 girls are terminated in sex selection abortions. So my question is, do you think pregnant women should be legally allowed to know a baby's gender with ultrasound scans, and how early? That's my question to you. Should pregnant women be legally allowed to know their baby's gender? So has anybody got any thoughts on that? If you unmute yourself.
In Nottingham, they stopped, this is a few years ago, they stopped telling the reduce the number of abortions. I don't know what the situation is now, but I know they did, because it was an issue. And one community nurse I worked with used to threaten some of the fathers of children where they knew it was a female, and say, you know, I remember one nurse who was reported because she threatened to throw him down the stairs if his wife was thrown down the stairs again. So it's quite a big issue, really. That was in Nottingham. A friend of mine was suspended for threatening to throw somebody down the stairs because his wife had been thrown down the stairs 3 times. She was expecting a baby girl. Yeah.
Yeah, so it does happen. It happens in UK. Has anybody else? Thank you, Margaret. Has anybody else got an example of that? Krishna, do you want to unmute yourself?
Just wanted to say, sorry, how do I do that?
You've done it. You've done it. I can hear you.
She's remuted herself.
Can you unmute yourself, Krishna?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you, yes.
Okay. It used to be that they did not tell anyone the gender of the child, because Northwest London, where I live, is quite a lot of Asian population, South Asian. And there was fear of this, but I don't know what the current practice is. But certainly when I had my child, they did not tell us the gender. Not that I wanted to know anyway, but that's what it was. So the authorities kind of came down on it, but I don't know what the current practice is. It might still be the same. But having said that, I did see something, the advert only appeared once in a local newspaper, offering genders, for scans for gender selection. And then the following week, the advert wasn't there. So I think someone realized this is not legal. So
Yeah.
that's all.
Yes, and for a while we were in an odd position where it was legal, but it wasn't moral.
Mm.
So thank you. Has anybody else got an example of that?
Well, I have a personal example. I mean, I had my child, my first child 30 years ago. And when I asked, just out of interest at the hospital at this, you know, if I could know what it was, the doctor immediately questioned me. Why did I want to know? Why did I want to know? And I knew instantly why. This African doctor, actually, and he was male, was really questioning me about why I wanted to know. To be honest, I didn't care whether I had a boy or a girl. I was curious, that's all. And I've got 2 daughters, by the way. But it's interesting that 30 years ago, I was asked that question. I've never forgotten that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because it becomes an issue, and then in certain countries where there's less females, then rape becomes an issue, and then everybody is saying, well, it's got nothing to do with that. But when you look at the proportions of male to female, then we question it.
It's really quite a lot, if I may say. I know personally of my cousin's wife in India must have had 3 abortions, which were female fetuses. And we were actually told that on the visit. And it's harrowing actually to hear that. But that goes on, because I am one of 7 sisters. So, so I'm very biased as far as, you know, that, and really asked many questions from a very young age about power, you know, things, issues and stuff. So when I came across this, and it goes on, sad to say, in India, and I've actually seen clinics where they were offering them, and of course they wouldn't let me question. I'm going back about 10, 15, maybe more years, that this isn't right, this is against the law, but why is it being done? But as an outsider, you don't really have any powers.
And on the one hand, there was the NHS, which had a policy of not telling them, like Martine was questioned when she asked to know. On the other hand, there's private clinics where you can pay for a gender test.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at different cultural explanations for conception, about how babies are made. Is it the stork bringing the baby in a nice little wrapper? What are the causes of conception? And I'm just going to try and get the screen a bit larger. Professionalism strikes. These kind of explanations that we have for conception, just one of them is a male and a female, and a sperm, a biological function between human beings of different gender. That's just one explanation. But there's also explanations about where you are on Earth, your ancestors are, is it the spirits of the dead that cause a baby to be made, or is it your past incarnations and your life in different incarnations? Then there's the group soul, where do babies come from, and the alignment of the planets, or artificial insemination. So all these things can influence beliefs about conception, and including your own moral behavior, without and apart from divinity and bringing the soul in. So there's lots of explanations for conception. And I go back, because my background is in anthropology. As I mentioned before, I've worked in India and in Africa, but these are people in Canada, and they drive trucks and they're Roman Catholics. But they say, although sexual intercourse is important for procreation, it's not enough. You have to have the souls of ancestors who want to be reborn. So the fetus is always the result of the death and regeneration of an ancestor. And this belief is common. It was found in the Trobriand island, and anthropologists have been there, and they said, oh, people are so mixed up with beliefs about incarnation and spiritual beings that he couldn't look at just biology without looking at the spiritual ideas together. And that was in 1929. So these beliefs about birth and death were intertwined, and people believed that ancestral spirits were the real cause of conception. And there's different thoughts about death. We'll do death and dying in a later session, but it was noticed that the women were responsible for supporting the birth of a child and also the birth of a new ancestor. So they supported people who were dying, that midwives, I think we had to choose that midwives were for birth rather than for supporting people dying at some years. So the question is, what do you believe babies are made of? Do you think we're born free? Has anybody got any ideas on that? Are we born free? Do we come into this world free? Has anybody got any thoughts?
My upbringing was Catholic, and as a young child, I was told regularly that I was responsible. I carried Adam and Eve's, I'm going to say mess up, but sin. Sorry. So I was bad through and through, and I'd got to spend my life getting my act together to overcome their sin. So that was my upbringing.
Oh, so you were born with original sin?
Completely, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Good to go, yeah.
Sophia, did you want to say anything?
No, I guess I was just thinking that I guess practically we can't really be born free because we're attached to a family and or community, hopefully, and I guess babies that aren't potentially suffer an awful lot, in care or whatever. So I don't know, it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, because the assumption is that babies are born free, but we'll look at that again later. So are we born free? So, and then the question becomes, well, what's a human being? Are we just flesh and bones and blood, or do we have any physical and non-physical attributes? Is there anything like a soul or a spirit that precedes and survives death? We will look at all of this in later sections. And here we've got the accurate representation of human anatomy from the International Vegetarian Unit. I thought you might like that, Krishna.
Yes. Interesting. Oh gosh.
Yeah, we like a bit of anatomy. Well, I will be looking at the body. I think I'm on the body next week. Mm-hmm. So a newborn's elements, a child is considered to be both an individual bounded by skin and to be permeable, so that spirits and things can go in and out of the child. And then the newborn consists of a body, breath and soul, but it isn't fixed at the skin. So it's believed to be permeable. So spirit beings, ancestral beings can influence it. And then my question becomes, when we look at mental health, is it just a newborn that's permeable to other things? And there's all kinds of prophylactic measures that may be used against supernatural attack during childbirth. I know when I was in Sudan, people used to carry knives under the pillow of the baby so that the evil eye would go to the shiny metal and not attract the baby. And then there's ceremonies that take place to ensure that the baby stays on earth. This one's from Thailand, where people use a cotton thread to tie the life force into the newborn. But they say the essence of life or vitality enters a woman's woman's womb at conception. Other people say the vitality only enters on birth. So there's a difference of opinion. And as a child becomes stronger, then it can stay longer on earth. So my question is, at the end of this, how might you use this kind of material in your training or your work or your daily life? What kind of actions might you take? So this is the end of the slides. So how might you use this kind of material in your daily life or in your work? Has anybody got any ideas?
I think for me, what was quite shocking was the statistic that you said that there's possibly 20,000 females in the UK risk of female genital mutilation. That shocked me. I think it's just being more aware that it's not just about how you've been brought up. It's about understanding that people have different sort of ways of seeing the world. So for me, it just raises that. It just raises it more for me to be more aware.
Yeah, that's right. And I was told not to use the word mutilation, but to use the word cutting.
Cutting, yeah, sorry. My apologies.
No, because now many people are from Somalia and Sudan. They're really huge activists questioning what's happening and to change.
I was going to say that, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, that I've heard, I mean, the first I heard of FGM, I'm probably going back to perhaps 30 plus years on Channel 4 in England. There was a program about it. And so, like the other lady, I'm also shocked that this is actually, the numbers are like you say they are. And for me, one of the preventative or the place to somehow monitor things is schools. Because I've got family who are teachers and they have told me that they are suspicious when a child has been abroad and comes back and is running back and forth to the loo. And so to that, I've asked them that, can you not tell safeguarding? Or, I know, I don't buy all this culturally sensitive and this and that. And, to me, if the law says, and if it's right and wrong and what it does to women in the long run, I suppose I'm biased coming from nursing background anyway. So, I'm quite shocked at how that sort of numbers are showing now, and not enough was done. I personally have worried in the past about females that I know from those communities, and kind of tried to sort of, got to know the mothers and knew that, they were very open-minded about these things. So I don't think, but it does cross your mind when you actually meet people one-to-one. But I think the place would be, and people do need to speak up and not hide behind something, sensitive or whatever.
Yeah, and I think the men are speaking up too now as well. Because when I first started talking about it with a group, it was completely normal, and the grandmas thought it normal. So it wasn't the men that were forcing it. It was the grandmas. It was the female elders that were insisting on it for purity and and all the rest of it.
Mm. That's why, you know, it's worrying, because sometimes many so-called professionals, you know, as in the health systems and that, they're trying not to unsettle people. I mean, I was even told that when I said to the teacher family that no, people wouldn't believe me, people wouldn't take me seriously. But I said, someone has to make that move, you know, otherwise it goes on. You know, if something is happening, then you have to speak up. In fact, because otherwise we are actually colluding in, because the long-term effects are horrendous, as some of us might have heard or read, you know, in childbirth and you know, actual sexual activity and that. You know, perhaps I'm a bit biased. So, you know, I don't know enough about it, but I certainly know that I have, you know, learned about it a long time ago. And when I told my, who is my 95-year-old mother, at that time, she might have been, say, in her 80s or something, and she could not believe what I was telling her, that this is actually done in some, you know, belief systems or some cultures. And my mother can't read and write either, so you know, all her knowledge is gained from us, you know, verbally, what she hears orally. So just goes to show how, you know, different cultures and things are.
Thank you, Krishna, because I remember years ago when I was working with Mind in Harrow.
Mm-hmm.
I've just seen Diane write your comment. When I was working for Mind in Harrow, I did like a 3-hour session on women and well-being. And I mentioned all sorts of things, but in those days, like 15, 20 years ago, I didn't mention anything until people mentioned it. And then at 5 to the hour, after 3 hours, someone said, well, why haven't you mentioned FGM? And this was a group of African women from Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea. And it was interesting because they had all heard of it, but the Muslim women from Asia hadn't got a clue, and there were teachers in the class who said that they were aware that some girls were taken on holiday and came back poorly, but it wasn't known about by Muslim Asian women, but just by Muslim African women.
Yeah, that explains quite a lot, because my mother is born and brought up in village India, and we come from Hindu tradition, but there were Muslim families there as well, uncles and aunts. We used to, when I first went, we would refer to each other as. Otherwise, my mom surely would have heard something about it, and she never had. So I think the practice certainly wasn't in India that we'd known of, you know.
Yes, and of course now the British government has made laws around it and trained airport staff to recognise people going away.
Okay.
Has anybody else got any, thank you Krishna, anyone else got any comments about other topics like the female identity of babies or?
And I was really surprised to read that so many female babies were being aborted in the UK, like up to 4,700, I think.
Yeah.
You said, so that. And I'm tempted to say, which I'm sure is ignorant, is that mainly from kind of non-traditionally English cultures. Does that, you know, also include you know, who is doing this in the UK, I guess.
Yes, because maybe it was one of those things that crept up on us that we weren't aware of until we saw the effects of it.
I think for me as well, it's my naivety. You know, when I used to think about sort of people finding out about the sex of the babies, it was let's have baby showers, let's have the sort of what's the word I'm looking for? You know, it's the surprise of having a boy or a girl, so they would announce it. And actually, sort of having this conversation today has made me think a little bit more about why would people want to know the sex of the child, and what's the rationale for that?
There you go.
Yeah, because we assumed it's people's right. It's a mother's right to know the gender of the child. But when you see the side effects of that, then you start questioning. Metal Rabbit, did you want to make any comments? I noticed you put something in the chat.
Towards the end, this discussion is a little different than what I thought it would be. I think I was looking forward to more of a discussion about changing archetypes. And yeah, it's departs very much from the line of thought that's going on now. So I'll wait till the end of the session.
Okay, we've only got another less than 10 minutes to go.
You want me to say it now?
Why not?
Okay.
And then Will, you can make a comment.
Okay. 2016 presidential election, we really saw one of the candidates personified the corporate feminist. And it's like, this is a very strange patriarchal, I can't think of the word, I'm having trouble speaking today. It's not really female energy, it's co-opted female energy. And I heard people say during that year, there's something wrong with women. So I guess the question is, if we're hearing people say that, and it's probably in response to the this corporate feminist, whatever you want to call it, that we've been pushed into accepting as feminism. I want a discussion about it because I don't have any really specific questions about it. And that was all I had to say.
Yeah, thank you for making those comments. I'm aware that I don't cover all the topics in particular sessions, so I'm glad that you raised that issue. Will, would you like to say what you've put in the chat, the resource, if you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I can do. I saw Diane ask about what we can do to prevent FGM, and I'm doing a master's in social work at the moment. So some of these topics, particularly around safeguarding children and safeguarding vulnerable adults, to be fair, this kind of stuff comes up a bit, and we're often directed towards statutory government guidance that's kind of comes based from the law. It's kind of how you put the law into practice. So I just linked, it's called FGM Safeguarding Report, and in the appendix area it has some guidance on how to spot if a mother who's recently given birth to a child might be at risk of FGM, or a young child themselves, if you like, maybe in a school setting or whatever. So it just has some information there that I thought might be, well, Diane asked for something, so I just had a quick look to see what I could find.
All right, thank you. I can send that the link around, or people can access it in the chat, but I can email it to the group. I'm aware of the time, and I know some people have other jobs to go to. Would anybody like to make a comment on how you found this session today?
I found it really interesting. Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, there was other, other bits, particularly about the, you're talking about the, how equally men are forced into marriage and other issues that I might not have thought about. And it's always really good to discuss and hear other people's thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Margaret, as well, saying in the chat it was interesting. And thank you, everybody, for the comments that you made. Would anybody like to make another comment, either in the open or in the chat, about how you found the topics today? Well, I shall wish you well. Next week, I'm looking at the body, the human body, and exploring exactly what different societies consider is normal. What's a normal body? So we'll look at those kind of things in the following week. But thank you all for coming back, and those of you who came for the first time, that's fine. But if you'd like to all unmute yourself and say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for all your comments. I'm